and I'm watching it at home, and they go to Don Shelby at the anchor desk on David Letterman, and he's just in his formal Don Shelby persona, looks into the camera and says, I have a gopher in my pocket named Carlos.
In my pants.
In your pants.
I have a gopher in my pants. And his name is Carlo.
Carlos.
I said that to Amelia.
It was brilliant. And I go, I'm sure they wrote that line for you, but you delivered it beautifully. That was great.
I should have called him Carlos.
Oh, that was great. Do you remember that, Brooke?
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I probably, of all the things I get asked in my life, as I walk down the street, total strangers say to me of a certain age, they will say, hey, Al Carlos! You said got him in your pants?
That's great.
Oh, man.
I love it when
I won 3 national Emmys, 2 George Fletcher Peabodys, the Distinguished Service Award, beating Koppel and Warriors, and that's what you remember?
Rookie and I won Pinewood Derby first place in our Cup Stout.
Yeah, hell yeah. I still think you led yours down. You weighed it down so it went faster. Jimmy, tell me about a hero in your life.
My dad, Kay Francis.
Where's your hero? He left?
Yeah.
Well, he's no longer your hero.
Yeah.
Who's your new hero?
Jim Turinskas. Jim Turinskas is here. Hey, I'll tell you a funny story about Jim Turinskas. We pulled a joke on them at the Buck Shack. They have this cabin that is in the remote. It is a 6-wheeler ride across a swamp. It is on the middle of a swamp. It's on an island. And we went out 2 or 3 weeks before hunting season, and his son and I said to Pete, I said, you know what? This would be a good spot. We could pull a prank on these guys, you know? And so we started to figure this out, and we took the camcorder and we filmed it out, and I said, see, if I go just on the edge of that, you can't see. Let's be a Sasquatch. So we planned the whole thing out. We had the Sasquatch. I'm not even up there. They don't even hunt with them up there, so I'm not even part of their normal routine. But it was the Friday of gun hunting opener. I go up. I meet the neighbor guy. We drive out on a 4-wheeler to get to the spot. It's 5 o'clock. The sun's dropping. I start at 5 o'clock, and no matter what, it's at 5, and we're doing it. And I walk across. I had stilts built and the whole deal. And I'm walking across with this Sasquatch outfit on. And Pete's at the cabin at the Buck Shack, and he's filming it, and he's yelling, and Uncle Harv is there, and he's, Uncle Harv says, should I whistle a bullet over his head? And Pete says, no, I don't want to do that. And so I walk across, and my stilt breaks, and I'm down on the ground, and I get back up, and I'm kind of grabbing stuff, and then I just walk, and I leave. And then I get on a 4-wheeler, and I go back to the cabin, and I take the stuff off, and I'm out of there. Well, they videotaped the whole thing, and then it got dark, and then they watched it again, and again, and again, and they're convinced that there is a Sasquatch out in these woods. Like, that is not a bear, that is an actual something walking on 2 legs. And they watch it back and forth, and they call the neighbor guy, and the neighbor guy comes over, and he's on his hands and knees. They got the magnifying glass, they're looking at it, and he's like, I've never seen anything like this in all my work. He's in on it with us, and he's like, oh my God, you guys, this actually looks like something. And the one guy says, I'm not going out on stand tomorrow, no way. And they're panicked, they're freaked out, and Jim Turinskas takes a picture of the video, of the TV screen. He takes a camera picture, and that's the only proof we had that this happened, because they rewound it, watched it, and then the next day they rewound it to watch it again, they didn't, and they shot these 2 big bucks, so they went out and filmed and recorded over the whole thing. But Jim was sitting there, I wasn't there, but the story goes, Jim is sitting there, he's got his legs crossed, he's got a chair in front of the TV, he's watching, he's smoking a cigar, and he looks at all the boys and he says, guys, I hope to hell they're not breeding out here. That's the Sasquatch story. That was a good time.
I want to ask Phil a question. This has always fascinated me, and I'm wondering if you ever had this conversation with your fellow hockey players. I have to assume when you're a pro in a sport, you compare yourself to athletes in other sports. So a pro baseball player, pro football player, pro basketball player. And I've always thought this about hockey. You have the hand-eye coordination that would be in all the sports. You have the little thing you got to keep your eye on and keep track of, like would be in baseball or a football being thrown, or basketball. You need to move fast. You have all these things that are similar to the other sports, but you do it on skates. So all the other guys in all the other sports do what they've been doing since they were 3 years old when they first learned to walk and run. They're just running. And then you have this added skill. And yet in the hierarchy, hockey gets fourth. Did you guys ever sit around and say that's bullshit?
Yeah, but I'll take the money to make it today, though. No, I think it's just we've never had the big contracts. We're seeing it now as far as major TV, and it's just it was a more northern state sport. All the southern states obviously now with Gretzky going to LA in '86, that changed the dynamic of the NHL because now you have expansion everywhere. Who would ever thought there'd be an expansion in Dallas, Tampa, or Florida, Miami? So he did some great things, but that's one of the things that is hard to realize that you don't get to be in one of the major sports. But obviously, basketball, football, baseball is one sport that everybody can pretty much do. And like you said, hockey it's different today. You got guys like Matthew from Toronto, who was raised in Arizona. You're seeing a lot more guys. I don't know if you guys know the National Development Team program that's in Plymouth, Michigan. It's the U17 and U18s. It's the top of the top kids that go to Plymouth, and they're seeing kids from all over the United States. So hopefully someday it'll get to that, but it's just where we're at.
But I would also add that being interviewing athletes, being in the locker rooms, seeing them and I was with Derek Bugard at opening a Cub, seeing them interact with their fans and with reporters, etc. I always use the good to the helper. The good to the help. They are good to the help. They're the most humble. The difference between an NBA guy and an NFL guy, and with the exception of Joe Mauer, a little difficult to deal with. The hockey guys always just seem to have a humble pie and just, shucks, everybody went through the same. But in baseball, everybody went through the same thing. 6:30 in the morning, your dad's taking you to the rink and mini mites and all that other stuff. But it just seems like hockey has maintained its humbleness with those athletes that are still the cream of the crop.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the way you were raised, right? A lot of the kids that come from Canada, very good, strong families, and I gotta say, my dad Leroy, I should have said he was my role model because he really taught me what it was to have work ethic. I know there probably 50% of the houses that he stuccoed here in South St. Paul, and I had to work one summer with him, and I said, I'll work one summer with you.
You pulled the cannon. I'm just asking one.
I worked in West St. Paul at the ice factory out there, loading 35-pound pallets, but it was a lot easier than it was, carrying stucco.
My daughters did play for St. Paul United, and my younger daughter Sophia played in the state tourney twice, and Nate Maurer was the coach of United. And this isn't anything to do with it now, but after their practice before they went to state, he brought them all around the rink and he said, I want you to go to your locker room. There's some girls that are waiting there that have been waiting to see you for whatever. And they went back to the locker room and they had all of their mini Mike pictures at each one's locker of them when they were little girls. And the crying in that locker room, I just thought that was one of the neatest things to say that there's some girls that wanted to, be you are in your locker room. Just a class act. I think every hockey guy is a class act, with the exception of,
yeah.
yes.
Hey, I'm proud that I'm from South St. Paul. I love this town growing up, and I'm here to support Jimmy, obviously, and great to see you guys again.
Great to see you.
I think that's a great time. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when I was a boy, I was growing up in Indiana, which is a basketball state. And every child born in my hometown of Muncie, in their bassinet in the hospital, a brand new Wilson leather last built basketball. Was in the crib of all the boys. This before the girls' basketball became famous. But you could tell the boys because it's brand new, of course it had been cleaned with alcohol. And the boys, and you kept that basketball your whole life and played with it, and you never were away from the rock. And I love basketball. I played basketball for 28 years. Played all service basketball. I played college basketball. And played in the over 35 league, won the state championship 7 times at WCCO. And it was so basketball was great, and I wrote a book called The Season Never Ends about basketball. I get a speaking engagement to the Minnesota Hockey Association to come speak to them. And I go, what in the fuck am I? Why would they want me to? Okay, all right, I will. So I go to the Hockey Association.
And you spend about a half an hour on your horseback.
I wish I had. I wish I had a little bit more interesting speech. But I'll preface this by saying that basketball wasn't my first love. Hockey was my first love. Because we were not rich enough to have a television set. We only had radio, and every game night I listened to WOWO 1190 and the Fort Wayne Comets. And the name that rings in my ear to this day, almost 70 years later, is Maurice Richard. And I could only imagine what hockey looked like because I had never seen hockey in my life. So I only had Jack Underwood as the announcer telling me about this. And it was the most fabulous, fast thing that I ever saw in my mind. So until I really didn't see hockey until I was about 30 years old. And so I did, but I still love the game and love it to this very moment. And now love soccer and compare it instead of basketball, I can compare it to hockey. And so I thought I could make some inroad, but I fucked up because I said hockey would be in Jacks, for Christ's sakes. So it's all these upstairs in Jacks, and there's just all these former Gopher players and former pro players. And I said hockey would be a much more interesting game if they would melt the ice, raise the goals 10 feet, inflate the puck, and put in the 3-point line.
Pretty good line.
And they told me to get the fuck out of here. And I think it was like a $200 bill that was supposed to be paid. They kept that money.
All right, well, we have one question. That's it. We have time for one question. Come on up. While you're coming up, you can help Jimmy. We're going to pass the hat tonight if you'd like to. You can give tomorrow online or at check-in. You got Venmo for Jimmy. Volunteer to drop literature. Share the website forwardwithfrancis.com. Plus, give a testimonial on your own social media and give Jimmy a tag on it. We got some work to do, and I think we can pull it off if we go South St. Paul and South St. Small and just door to door and tell everybody, get a sign, keep going forward, and we'll make him a Dakota County Commissioner.
Thanks. I've got a question for Tom Michigan. I'm an old AM radio aficionado going back into the 70s, so I can't tell you, especially after dark, we used to get to listen to all kinds of stuff from Oklahoma City, Little Rock, Omaha, Winnipeg. I'm from northern Minnesota. I'm married to South St. Paul. Girl, don't hold that against me. But I've got a question for Tommy. So for those of you who had the privilege of listening to TD Mischke, he was always best after 9 p.m., as far as I'm concerned. So he was rocking and rolling.
That's when the beer kicked in.
He was outstanding. It was nothing but entertainment. It was after my kids went to bed, and it was nothing but quiet. you had a guy who would call in every 4 or 5 days, and he'd say, "Hey Mitch, and he was, I always thought he was half inebriated, and once in a while they'd say, "This is a shtick," and then the next time, "This guy's legit."
Well, legitimately drunk. Yeah, he was a legitimate, raging alcoholic who I'm sure died not long after of liver disease. What was strange, you're talking about Joe.
Joe. Yes.
What was strange about that is I listened to him on Barrero in the afternoon, and he was actually clear-headed and articulate and eloquent. But on my show, it was a horror show, what he called. It was the worst. He lived with his mother and was just, I got a lot of guys at night who weren't allowed on the air anywhere else during the day. In fact, my rule of thumb was if you're banned during the day at KSTP, you're welcome at night. Because that's what I want. I don't want someone who's going to argue with Jason Lewis about politics. I want some weird old lady who's going to tell me about the fact that her mother died and is in the other room and she's wondering how long she has to go before taking her to the morgue. Don's getting a call. Let's all pause. Who is it? Spam risk.
So, thank you.
That's Joe.
I always wondered, but it was always fabulous. Thank you very much for entertaining an old country boy.
Well, thank you for that. I'm doing a road show right now. I'm actually it comes out, they come out the first of the month every year, every month, the first of the month, so it's out Saturday. And the woman I'm interviewing is in far northern Scotland, the Shetland Islands. They might as well be Norway. They're just to hell and gone up there. But she started listening to my show in Midland, South Dakota when she was 9 years old. Her brother listened with her at 6 years old, and they were in the basement pretending to be asleep. She's 37 right now, and I'm doing a story on her because she has had an astounding life, one of the most extraordinary lives I've ever encountered. But the weirdest thing about my show was old people, like 90, and 6-year-olds and 9-year-olds were my main listeners. I know some people in between liked it, but man, I was big with the old people and the children. So I think the old people was a second childhood deal. The mind's going, and they can connect with me a little clearer, and the kids still connect because they haven't learned anything yet. But I always used to freak out a little bit. I'd go home to my wife and I said, "Honey, I think I'm mainly a big hit with people who aren't in our demographic. I mean, they're not buying stuff. They're not going to Fury Motors and getting cars, man. I don't know if I'm going to keep my job." So,
have you been back to Butte, Montana at all?
Yeah. The last road show I did was my Montana road show, which is filled with Evel Knievel stories.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Oh, one more thing. The reason why I came here tonight wasn't because of Jimmy, although I know Jimmy. It was because I wanted to see one more time Don Shelby in a tie, but that's okay. That's all right. So if anybody ever remembers Don on the 6 o'clock news, his tie was immaculate and his knot was about the size of a dime. So I just want to let that know.
Hey, I want to say this, because I don't know how many people know this. This guy has had 8 strokes and couldn't talk not too long ago, and has rallied himself on his own by working his ass off to be what we have tonight. I mean, it's rather extraordinary, this kind of story. I don't know if you know this. So that's a pretty remarkable tale.
I don't want this to sound like I am returning a compliment because I had this prepared just as this conversation was going on. But it wasn't just 6-year-olds and 90-year-olds. It was me. Every night that I drove home, no matter what channel you were on, every time I drove home, I had the radio turned to Michigan after the 12 o'clock news. And I can say without qualification that question. But that's without question, because the intelligence of this man is beyond anything that I have ever encountered in 55 years of broadcasting and meeting some of the greats of broadcasting nationally and locally. But he is absolutely the best.
All right, guys, the bar is still open. Thank you, panelists, Mr. Housley, T.D. Mishke, Mr. Don Shelby, and Mr. Matron of Honor, James Francis, Mayor Francis. Thank you for coming tonight. And again, we've got the grassroots efforts going. Let's get those door knocking. Let's get those signs out there. And let's get this man elected. Thank you.